She does not need friends. She needs protection. That is what the billionaire said to the headmistress of Wren Academy on the first day of the school year, standing in her office in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, his voice carrying the particular authority of a man who had written a check large enough to build the school's entire East Wing. His name was James Aldrich Ashford. The world called him a billionaire CEO. The financial press called him a visionary. The people who worked for him called him Sir and meant it the way soldiers mean it, with deference built on something close to fear. But his daughter called him Dad, and she said it with her hands. Victoria was 7 years old. She had been deaf since birth. Profound sensorineural hearing loss, bilateral, the doctors had explained, which was their clinical way of saying that Victoria would never hear her father's voice, never hear music, never hear the sound of rain against a window or laughter bouncing off the walls of a school cafeteria. The billionaire had responded to the diagnosis the way he responded to every problem. He threw resources at it. The finest audiologists, cochlear implant consultations, speech therapists who charged $400 an hour. He enrolled Victoria in the most exclusive private school in the state, a school he personally funded, a school where every teacher was trained, every accommodation was made, every possible barrier was removed. Except one. The one barrier that money cannot purchase a solution to. The one that no billionaire CEO, no matter how powerful, can bulldoze with a phone call or a wire transfer. Loneliness. Victoria sat alone at lunch every day. Table 14, far corner of the cafeteria, near the window where the light came in at an angle that made the dust motes visible, floating in the air like tiny planets with no gravity and no orbit. She sat there with her tray, her sandwich cut into quarters, her apple juice box, her small container of grapes, and she ate in a silence that was different from the silence the other children experienced. Their silence was a choice. Hers was permanent. She watched them. Every day, she watched their mouths move. She watched them laugh, their heads thrown back, their shoulders shaking with a joy that produced a sound she could not access. She watched them whisper and shout and argue and reconcile, all through a medium that excluded her as completely as a locked door. The teachers thought she preferred it. That is what they told themselves. Victoria is independent. Victoria is content. Victoria has her books. They mistook her composure for comfort. They mistook her stillness for peace. Because Victoria had learned something that no 7-year-old should have to learn. She had learned that if you sit quietly enough, people stop feeling guilty about ignoring you. The billionaire did not know. He dropped her off each morning in a black car with tinted windows. Frankie, his driver, opened the door. Victoria climbed out with her backpack, waved to her father through the glass, and walked into a building that treated her like a glass sculpture, admired from a distance, handled with care, but never truly held. James Ashford, the billionaire CEO who controlled a tech empire spanning 14 countries, who sat in rooms with presidents and spoke and the world adjusted, did not know that his daughter ate lunch alone every single day. Because Victoria never told him. Not with her hands. Not with her eyes. Not with any of the signs she knew. She kept it from him the way children keep things from parents they love too much to disappoint. She thought it was her fault. She thought there was something about her, beyond the deafness, something fundamentally unworthy of company, that made the other children smile politely and sit somewhere else. She did not have the language yet for what she was feeling because loneliness at 7 years old does not announce itself. It accumulates. It becomes normal. It becomes the water she swam in, invisible because it was everywhere. Then the triplets arrived. They came on a Tuesday in October. 3 boys. Identical in face, wildly different in energy. Their names were Marcus, Mateo, and Miles, and they entered Wren Academy like a weather system, loud and unpredictable and impossible to ignore. They were scholarship kids. Their mother was a hospital janitor who had applied to Wren on a long shot and wept when the acceptance letter arrived. The triplets had come from a public school where the hallways smelled like floor wax and the textbooks were 10 years old, and they walked into Wren's marble foyer with eyes wide and shoes scuffed and the unshakable confidence of boys who had always had each other and therefore had never truly been without. By lunch on their first day, they had already been scolded twice. Marcus for sliding down the banister. Mateo for asking the science teacher if volcanoes could be used as weapons. Miles for saying nothing at all, which somehow made the teacher more nervous than his brother's antics. They got their trays. They scanned the cafeteria. Every table was full of children who looked at the triplets the way museum visitors look at a new exhibit, with curiosity that had not yet decided whether to become interest or judgment. And then Miles saw her. Victoria, table 14. Alone. She was reading a book. Her grapes were untouched. The light from the window caught her hearing aids, two small devices she wore not because they helped much, but because her father, the billionaire, believed in trying everything. Miles nudged Marcus. Marcus nudged Mateo. The three of them stood in the middle of the cafeteria, holding their trays, looking at a girl who was looking at a book, and something passed between them. Not a word. Not a plan. Just the silent agreement of brothers who had spent their whole lives communicating in a language that existed below speech. They walked to table 14. They sat down. Victoria looked up. If this story has already grabbed your heart, go ahead and subscribe right now. Because what these triplets do next is going to break you open. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been the kid sitting alone? Victoria stared at the three identical faces that had just materialized across her table like something out of a dream she had not given herself permission to have. No one sat at table 14. That was the rule, not a written rule. The kind of rule that forms when children collectively decide that someone exists outside their circle and then forget they made the decision at all. The triplets did not know the rule, or they did not care. Both possibilities were equally terrifying to Victoria. She looked at Marcus, who was already biting into his sandwich with the enthusiasm of someone who considered eating a competitive sport. She looked at Mateo, who was examining his apple juice box as if it contained classified information. And she looked at Miles, the quiet one, who was looking directly at her with an expression she could not decode. She waited for them to realize their mistake. To notice who she was, the billionaire CEO's deaf daughter, the girl the teachers whispered about, the girl the other kids treated like an exhibit behind glass. She waited for the polite retreat, the awkward excuse, the scraping of chairs. Miles put down his juice box. He looked at his brothers. They looked at him. And then, slowly, carefully, with the clumsy precision of someone who had practiced in front of a phone screen in a small apartment while his mother worked night shifts, Miles raised his hands. He signed one word. Friend. The sign for friend. Right index finger hooked over left index finger, then reversed. A simple motion. A child's motion. Imperfect in execution, slightly wrong in the angle of the wrist, the kind of mistake that would make a fluent signer smile. But Victoria did not smile. Victoria's eyes filled with water so fast it was as if something inside her had been waiting, pressurized, sealed, desperate for exactly this moment to release. No one at Wren Academy had ever signed to her. Not the teachers, who used interpreters. Not the staff, who used gestures. Not the children, who used nothing at all because they had decided that communication with Victoria was someone else's responsibility. She was the billionaire's daughter. She was taken care of. She was fine. She was not fine. She had not been fine for 2 years. And now a boy she had never met, a scholarship kid with scuffed shoes and a crooked smile, was sitting at her empty table signing a word that she had never been offered by anyone in this building. Friend. She signed back. Her hands moved with the fluency of someone for whom sign was not a second language, but a first, her fingers forming the word with a grace that made Miles's attempt look like a stick figure next to a painting. Friend. Mateo leaned over to Marcus and whispered, I think it worked. Marcus whispered back, Shut up. She is going to think we are weird. Miles did not whisper anything. He just smiled. And Victoria smiled back. And in that smile was the fracturing of a wall that had taken 2 years to build. A wall made not of stone but of silence and assumption and the particular cruelty of a world that teaches children that different means distant. Over the next 3 weeks, the triplets sat at table 14 every single day. They learned signs. Not from a tutor or a class. From videos on their mother's phone at night, huddled together on a bottom bunk, whispering the meanings to each other while their mother slept. They learned hello. They learned funny. They learned your turn and watch this and the sign for stop it which they used on each other constantly. Victoria taught them more. She taught them the sign for thank you and the sign for brother and the sign for loud, which she used whenever Marcus got too animated, which was always. She taught them the sign for secret and the sign for promise. And the 3 boys guarded both with the seriousness of knights who had been given a sacred oath. The cafeteria noticed. Of course it noticed. Children are the most observant creatures on earth. They see everything and understand more than adults give them credit for. They saw the triplets laughing with Victoria. They saw the four of them inventing their own signs, private codes for things that did not have official signs, like the specific way Mateo's hair stuck up after gym class, or the face Marcus made when he did not understand his math homework. And slowly, cautiously, the way sunlight enters a room when a curtain is pulled back inch by inch, other children began approaching table 14. First one, then two, then a cluster. They asked Victoria to teach them signs. They sat with her. They stumbled through finger spelling and laughed at their own mistakes. And Victoria laughed too, a laugh that made no sound but moved her entire body, and the children discovered that laughter does not require volume. It requires connection. Table 14 was not empty anymore. The headmistress noticed. She called the billionaire CEO's office. James Ashford, the billionaire, was in a board meeting when his assistant handed him a note. He read it. He read it again. He excused himself from a room full of people who controlled more combined wealth than some nations, and he called the school. What do you mean she has friends? Mr. Ashford, I am telling you that your daughter has been sitting with 3 boys, the triplet transfer students, every day for 3 weeks. And other children are joining them. The cafeteria looks different. Victoria looks different. I thought you would want to know. The billionaire stood in his corner office, 62 floors above the city, a man who could buy anything on earth, and felt something collapse inside him that he had not known was standing. He had not known she was alone. He had not known. He had given her the best school money could build. He had given her every accommodation a billionaire CEO could engineer. And he had missed the only thing she actually needed. Now I need you to stop and subscribe to this channel right now. Because when this billionaire walks into that school and sees what those triplets did for his daughter, I promise you, you are not ready. Tell me in the comments, have you ever underestimated what a child really needs? James Ashford, the billionaire CEO, had entered rooms that would intimidate most humans. Boardrooms with heads of state, negotiations with hostile investors, meetings where billions moved on the weight of a single sentence. He had walked into every one of those rooms with his spine straight and his mind clear and his pulse steady. He was not steady now. He stood outside the cafeteria at Wren Academy, looking through the small window in the door, and his hands were trembling. Not with fear, with something worse. Recognition. The recognition that the most important thing in his life had been suffering in plain sight while he wrote checks and made calls and told himself that providing was the same as protecting. Through the glass, he could see table 14. Victoria was in the center. Not at the edge, not tucked into the corner where she used to fold herself small. In the center. Around her sat the triplets, Marcus making dramatic gestures that were half sign language and half interpretive dance, Mateo drawing something on a napkin and sliding it toward Victoria for approval, Miles sitting close to her with the quiet attentiveness of a boy who understood that presence is its own language. And around them, orbiting like small planets drawn to a new gravity, were other children. 6 of them. 8. Signing clumsily, laughing, passing food, existing in the kind of chaotic, beautiful, noisy without noise communion that James had never seen his daughter experience. Victoria was laughing. He had seen her laugh before. At home, watching cartoons, playing with the dog. But this was different. This was the laugh of a child who has been found. The laugh of someone who has stepped out of a room they did not know they were locked in and felt air on their face for the first time. He pushed open the door. The cafeteria went quiet. Not because the children were scared. Because when a man like James Ashford walks into a room, the air changes. Everyone at Wren knew who the billionaire was. The teachers straightened. The staff stiffened. The children stared. Victoria saw him. Her face shifted through confusion, then surprise, then something fragile and hopeful that made the billionaire feel like the floor was giving way beneath his handmade shoes. She signed to him. "What are you doing here, Dad?" He walked toward table 14. Every step felt like a confession. He passed tables full of children who watched him the way all children watch powerful adults, with a mixture of awe and wariness, trying to determine whether this large presence was safe. He reached the table. He looked at the triplets. 3 identical faces looked back at him with expressions that ranged from curious to mildly terrified. Marcus whispered to Mateo, "Is that her dad?" Mateo whispered back, "He looks like he owns a country." Miles said nothing. Miles watched. James looked at his daughter. He knelt down beside the table so that he was at her eye level. This was something he rarely did in public. Make himself smaller, lower himself, surrender the physical advantage of height that men like him use instinctively to maintain authority. But here, in this cafeteria, in front of his daughter and 3 boys who had done what his billions could not, authority was not what was needed. He signed to Victoria. Slowly. His sign language was imperfect. He had learned it when she was diagnosed, practiced it in private, used it at home. But he had never signed in public. Never in front of strangers. Because somewhere in the architecture of his identity as a billionaire CEO, a man of power and precision and control, signing had felt like an admission of something he was not ready to admit. That his daughter was different. That his world needed to adjust. That communication was not a problem to be solved with money, but a bridge to be built with patience. He signed, "I did not know you were eating alone." Victoria's face changed. The hope that had been forming in her eyes shifted into something more complicated. The expression of a child who has been keeping a secret to protect a parent and has just been told the secret is out. She signed back. "I did not want you to worry." 7 years old. She did not want the billionaire to worry. She had carried loneliness like a backpack full of stones, every day, up the stairs of this school and into this cafeteria and back home again. And she had hidden it from the one person on earth who would have burned the world down to fix it, because she loved him too much to let him see. James Ashford, the billionaire, the CEO, the man whose name moved markets and silenced boardrooms, closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He turned to the triplets. "You are the boys," he said. "You are the ones who sat with her." Marcus straightened up. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Marcus looked at his brothers. The triplets did that thing again, the silent communication that exists between siblings who have shared everything since before memory, a look that is also a conversation that is also an agreement. "Because she was alone," Marcus said. "And we know what that feels like. Before it was the 3 of us, before we figured out that we had each other, we were the weird kids. The triplets. People stared but nobody talked to us. And then we found each other. And it was better. Everything was better. She did not need someone to fix her ears," Matteo added, with the bluntness of a child who has not yet learned to soften truth. "She just needed someone to sit down." Miles spoke last. The quiet one. The one who had learned the first sign. The one who had looked across a crowded cafeteria and seen what every adult in the building had missed. "We learned the sign for friend," Miles said. "That is all we did. One word. It was not hard. I do not understand why nobody did it before." James looked at this boy, this scholarship kid in scuffed shoes who had changed his daughter's life with a single gesture that cost nothing, required no resources, no meetings, no strategy, no power. Just the willingness to see someone and the courage to reach toward them. The billionaire CEO stood up. He looked at the cafeteria, at the children who were watching, at the teachers in the doorway, at the world he had built for his daughter that had everything in it except the one thing she needed most. He pulled out a chair. He sat down at table 14. Victoria stared at him. The triplets stared at him. The entire cafeteria stared at the billionaire CEO, sitting at a lunch table with 4 children, his suit jacket brushing against a juice box stain, his presence filling the small space the way sunlight fills a jar. He looked at Victoria and signed, "Teach me. Teach me how to be here. Not just at home. Here. In your world. I want to learn." Victoria's lower lip trembled. She looked at Miles. Miles nodded, as if giving her permission to believe this was real. She turned back to her father. She reached out and took his hand. She placed his fingers into the shape of a sign he did not know. "What is that?" he asked. She smiled. And with her other hand, she pointed at the triplets, at the children around the table, at the space between all of them that was no longer empty. "Family." The billionaire looked at his daughter. He looked at 3 boys from a small apartment who had crossed a distance that his private jets and global influence could not. He looked at the word his daughter had placed in his hands, a word that had nothing to do with blood or name or wealth. He closed his fingers around the sign and held it. At the next board meeting, the billionaire CEO proposed a new initiative. Every school in the Ashford Foundation network would implement sign language as a core part of the curriculum, not as an elective, not as an accommodation, as a language, taught to every student, hearing or not. Because communication, he told a room full of people who controlled more money than some countries, is not a disability issue. It is a human one. and we have been failing at it. The triplets never left table 14. Neither did Victoria. Neither did the children who joined them, week by week, drawn not by obligation or pity, but by the simple magnetic pull of belonging. And every Friday afternoon, a black car with tinted windows would pull up to Wren Academy, and the billionaire CO would walk through the doors, sit at a table in the corner of the cafeteria, and eat lunch with his daughter and 3 boys who had taught him something that all his power and all his money and all his years of building empires had never been able to teach him. That the smallest word, spoken in the quietest language, by the most unexpected person, can change everything. All you have to do is sit down. And that is where this story ends, but your part is just beginning. If this story made you feel something, if Victoria and those triplets reminded you that kindness does not need to be loud to be powerful, then I need you to subscribe right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And drop a comment telling me, what is one word you wish someone had said to you when you were sitting alone? I read every single comment. And the next story is coming soon. Trust me, you are going to want to be here for it.